from the First National Bank Tower, this is KLEK Jonesboro, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council.
Jonesboro's community radio station. Your life, your music. KLEK 102.5 FM.
Good Thursday morning, Jonesboro. This is meteorologist Tim Root with your KLEK 102.5 forecast. You'll be partly to mostly sunny across the area today, the high in the mid to upper 80s, and the winds will be very light from the south. Almost calm tonight, mostly clear in the low 70s. Spotty showers and thunderstorms in the mid to upper 80s Friday, partly sunny. Another round of showers and thunderstorms planned for the weekend, partly sunny. The temperature each day, Saturday and Sunday, near 90. Educate, entertain, and empower. We're KLEK 102.5 FM.
From Feature Story News in London, I'm Ollie Barrett. Russians are voting on amendments to the constitution, one of which would reset Vladimir Putin's term limits. The Australian army is being deployed in Victoria as coronavirus cases surge. With over 70,000 infections of COVID-19, Delhi is now India's biggest coronavirus hotspot. And the Eiffel Tower has reopened in Paris, more than 3 months after France went into its lockdown.
It's 9:14.
KLEK LP Jonesboro, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council. It's now time for Community Conversations, a program focusing on the people working to make the Jonesboro community a better place, while offering viewpoints from all sides of the issues. The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of KLEK 102.5 FM, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, or our underwriters or sponsors.
KLEK 102.5 FM, good morning to you on your Thursday. It's June 25th, 2020. A little late starting, had a little issues that come up. But we're here. This is Community Conversations. Kiddo Wonders in the studio with you. I am joined via Zoom by Quabila Jones, host of Community Conversations. And we have joining us in studio is Mrs. Shunqetta Cunningham, the principal and owner of CARES Grants and Services. And she's got some tips today that can help your local nonprofit organization. So we're going to go ahead and get right into our interview today, Quabila. You're muted.
Okay, good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Can you hear me okay? Hello?
She can hear you. She can hear you. Can you hear her?
No.
You can't hear her, but she can hear you.
Okay, we're just gonna get right
into it. What can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, Shunqetta, speak.
Hello.
You still don't hear her?
Okay. Yes, now do.
Okay.
All right, so good morning, everyone. Sorry. Welcome to live radio. Okay, so we're going to jump right into our topic today, the misconceptions of grants and startup funding. And so thank you, Shunqetta, for offering these free tips because I think there's a lot of people who don't understand what all grant writing and funding entails. So let's just start at the very beginning. Before you even decide, okay, I want to start this organization, I want to get this money, what are some things you advise your clients on before even seeking a grant?
Before you even decide, okay, I want to start this organization, I want to get this money, what are some things you advise your clients on before even seeking a grant?
Oh, Lord.
grant and I get the calls and say, hey, I need a grant to buy equipment. I want to start a lawn care business, so I need a grant to buy the fuel and the lawn care equipment and the building to house it in. And so all of this, it kind of gets there's a big misconception that when you start a business that it should be 100% funded by someone else, and that's just false. So that's kind of one of the biggest things I wanted to talk about, that when you're starting an organization, or even if you have a business, unless someone can tell me differently, and there are a few exceptions, but there's not a pot of money that's going to say, hey, you need $100,000, I'm going to give you $100,000 for nothing, just because it's your idea. That's just not true.
Okay, I want to reflect back real quick on the nonprofit summit you had, and when you had individuals share, those little snippets about their organization. I understand with the grant, of course, a grant is multiple pages long. However, explain why it's important to know your mission and your goals. Like, have them so down packed that no matter where you are, you can just spit it out, but spit it out with passion. And then how that can also translate to your grant application.
Right. So any type of funding that you're asking for, it should all go back to your mission and your programs. Oftentimes, if you do see a grant opportunity, you want to kind of change that to tailor towards that particular grant, but then you're chasing money. And if you're true to your mission and your programs, then the dollars are attracted to you. Be consistent in that. So it is vitally crucial if just like with KLEK, the mission is to entertain, empower, and educate. And so the programs that come from that is centered around that model and that mission. And that's the same for your organization. If you are going after any funding, and whether that's grants, whether that's asking a business to sponsor your program, you're asking your donors, all of that has to go back to your mission. So it is great to rehearse your mission statement, your programs, to ensure that your board members also are well versed on what it is that you are doing, and then you can articulate your need. And so what your need is not that you need a new building. If you are wanting to mentor young girls, you are needing funding to be a positive influence to teenagers 13 through 18 years of age. And, by being placed in a building, you're able to have a structured and a consistent environment to be able to execute that program. And so while the funding request I just said may be for that building, but it's also how you articulate, and it's also in your ask. But just thinking that because you have your organization and you have a mission and programs that people automatically are to give to you, or that it has to be 100% funded, again, that's one of the false myths of grant funding, and it's really hurting the community at large who thinks like that. And it also kind of just puts a negative spin when people come to me, because they feel like I am kind of impeding their process of seeking or attracting grant funds. But I operate in integrity, and so I vow to tell you the truth. And of again, false narratives that's painted around grant funding.
Okay. I want to ask this. What is the reality of, when it comes to applying, writing, and receiving an answer, what is the reality, the time frame people need to be aware of? And then in that waiting time, what else can they do?
So in normal times, usually you have an RFP, a request for a proposal, that an organization, a grant funder, will put out on their website, their social media pages, email blasts, and they will tell you, the upcoming dates. And a lot of these organizations are annual, or they're throughout the year. So I would encourage for organizations to have a grant calendar. And so you can put together a list of grant opportunities that you would apply for. Now remember, grants are not 100% guaranteed. You can have a stellar proposal. You can have all your financials in order. Your program could be the only program unduplicated in your community, but there are certain factors that are outside of your control if your proposal is not funded. So let me just say that grants are not 100% funded. But I encourage a grant calendar, and that way you will, again, have a timeline for when you want to apply. But also remember, if you are abreast of your needs by taking an assessment, okay, what it is that we are needing to do for this year. So if that's an expansion or scalability of programs, or you want to again, expand your outreach, all of that should be articulated when you're having maybe at the top of the year your board retreat, or you're reviewing your annual goals. And so then you can put together a frame of reference. So here's what we need, and then here's a budget to match those needs, and that's how you know the grant funding to apply for.
Okay. When an agency organization is getting ready to even just look at grants, I know that from my experience in the nonprofit world, there are grants that are faith-based. There are grants that, provide money for whatever the cause. And so how would you advise your clients to, I guess, on which type of grant to go for and not just apply for any money because it's out there?
Well, that makes perfect sense. A great question. Because one of the things that we and most people kind of fail to realize is that when you are getting a grant from an organization, and you want it to be a continual process, not that that's guaranteed, but this is a relationship. You are wanting to establish a relationship with these potential grant funders, so that there is an attraction to continue to fund your program, or they can help you, by placing you in contact with other donors. Other grant funders as well. So remember that when you are seeking and you're putting together your proposal, you're potentially putting together a partnership in words with a grant funder. So that is crucial. I can't even stress that enough. That is crucial when you are applying for grants. And, also keep in mind that grant funders, and when people are reviewing your proposal, these are just regular humans and human beings that also are reviewing them through their own scope of experience. And so when you're putting together your proposal, you have to communicate your vision and your mission as if they do not know what you do. They don't have no understanding of what it is. You're putting your heart all into this proposal, but there are some measurable objectives and goals that you have placed with it. So, but I think, I just wanted to stress that when you're applying for grants, and how I advise my clients, that this is a partnership. So it's a partnership, and then too, you don't want to disrespect anyone's money. And what I mean by that, again, oftentimes we believe, since we have a nonprofit, we want to help veterans, we want to do neighborhood cleanup, we want to be involved in decreasing human trafficking, whatever, your cause is. It doesn't make it worthy enough if you don't have the structure in place to ensure people have a return on investment when they are providing free money to you. So be sure that you have things in line, and that you have the capacity as well to attract those grant funds. And I think I probably answered like that 4 different ways, but I'm sorry for that. I could just keep going.
No, but it brought me to another question. While the grant funder is looking at you, the organization, and your structure, should the organization also do some deeper research into the funder? You and I have had a conversation about conscious consumerism. You don't want to just shop with anybody just because they carry the product that you want or need. So should organizations have that same attitude towards funders? Look at who they funded, what those organizations stand for, what does the funding company stand for? What are their have they always operated out of integrity? Things of that nature.
Last one because I kept going. So going back to yes, right funding and the right funding partner, um, that is absolutely crucial because again, if we are just trying to, you have to be careful as a nonprofit or as a business that when you are seeking grant funds that you do not compromise your mission, your programs, and then your target population because you see there's opportunity to get $50,000 because then you continue to change that. And so it's not so much about the grant funders, it's really about ensuring that you are so defined on what you do. Then you, when you are looking for potential grant funders, you have to ensure that their mission also is in alignment with your mission and
Okay.
that it does in attracting those funds would not compromise your mission in any way. And so even if people are saying I want to write a blank check to you, but the values of that a potential grant funder are not in alignment, then that's definitely something to consider, heavily consider, because again, everything that your organization do, and that's even with attracting funding, that's still your brand, and it still has a direct impact on the people that you're trying to serve. And remember, we're talking about a lot of this is about nonprofits. It's not, and that's different from business. Your bottom line is the impact on the community. Your bottom line is the impact on the people that sign up for your services. And so you have to think differently. And businesses should too, but as a nonprofit that's getting public money that's tax exempt, you should be thinking differently in who you want to partner with, even when it comes to funding.
Okay. We have other questions from the live feed. Mackenzie, how much time do we have in this segment?
We have about 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'll just ask both the questions together. From Ms. Martha Gaines, how do you address the tax issue, and what type of documentation should be on file for transparency when the grant is funded?
Will you just give me more clarity on that first question? So I will not just answer that and how I'm assuming to answer that. But as far as your second question, documentation is you want to, again, everything starts from your mission and your vision statement. And so when you're writing your proposal, the grant funder are going to have the necessary requirements for that. And those are the same requirements that you're going to keep for records. So with your budget, keep all of your expenditure reports and your receipts. And often, many grant funders will want maybe annual reports or mid-year reports, and so that's also a way of accountability. But if you receive $10,000, just say from the Dollar General Literacy Foundation for your summer program, and you said you were buying books and you were also buying book bags for the children, then that's the sole purpose to which those funds should be allocated for. And so keep all the receipts for that, and all of the transactions, and your reports of who you distributed the bags to, also any testimonials. But those are some key documents that's going to be needed because, again, many of the grant funders are going to want to see proof of execution, and then proof of receipt of you spending those grant dollars. And so those are just some of the basic things. And then anything else that's required, the particular grant funder will share that information.
I know that we've talked about, different type. Well, no, we haven't talked about the different types of grants like in detail. But when we come into our next segment, I want to get into how to make sure you're applying for the right grant to cover other needs. You talked about covering the program needs, or maybe but we haven't talked about salaries, if that's even a thing. Office supplies, those just certain, just basic operating expenses, and how to look for those type of grants, or even how to write into the grant. And again, I know this is where grant writer comes into play. So, but I definitely want to touch on that when we come back.
Just even I think the larger picture, one of the things that we want to discuss too is this is the perfect opportunity to have a plan that is a diversified plan of income and diversified funding streams for your nonprofit. I, as a grant writer, and I started this business based on grant writing, but I would even tell you if your program is 100% funded by a grant, then you're just limiting yourself on the possibilities of relationships with potential funders and donors. And so, but again, we can talk, discuss that more on the next break, and then too how that's applicable to certain organizations. Whether you should be, how much grants you should be receiving into your organization. That also kind of depends on your classification as well.
Okay. And definitely want to touch on startup funding, the other talking point of this conversation, because some people may not know what it really takes to just to get started, period, outside of having grants available. So we'll definitely touch on that as well. Again, do you have anything you'd like to add from your experience?
Well, like Shunqetta said, from our experiences, definitely it was a case that we had to, and even now, use diversified funds of operation. Like with KLEK, we have our underwriters and sponsors, we have our donors, we host different fundraising events like the pledge drives and Kwanzaa and Juneteenth. All of those are fundraising opportunities, and now we're just getting in a position to where the grants are coming. But like Shunqetta and I said off there, this is just a seasonal thing. It may not last, but if you have multiple, kind of like in the for-profit world, if you have multiple streams of income, you won't stress if one of them actually falls off, because there'll be others to pick up the slack. With that, we're going to get ready to go into a break, but we will be back with more with Shunqetta Cunningham, giving all kinds of good tidbits to help your nonprofit. Don't go anywhere. To see Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
You're listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We'll be right back.
Is your child spoiled? I'm Mark Merrill with today's Family Minute. Many parents walk a fine line between caring for their children and spoiling their children, but the difference is not too complicated. Caring is always giving your children what they need. Spoiling is always giving your children what they want. When children become accustomed to getting what they want, how they want it, and when they want it, they develop a very self-focused, selfish mindset. So here are a couple of things to do to help you avoid spoiling your children. First, don't pick up after your kids. Though it's easier to just do it yourself, be sure to have your children learn to clean up their own messes. Second, don't let them boss you around. When your children start making demands, take charge to avoid being manipulated. Train your kids well, and remember, your family first.
Made possible by the Kappa Nu Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, a non-profit organization committed to service to all mankind. Kappa Nu Omega Alpha Kappa Alpha on Facebook.
The Office of Diversity and Community Engagement at Arkansas State University, under the leadership of Dr. Maurice Gibson, is a proud supporter of KLEK and is dedicated to finding innovative ways to advance their mission of creating a diverse and inclusive environment, conducive to educating, enhancing, and enriching lives, uplifting various and diverse groups on the A-State campus, and striving to maintain Arkansas State University a place that is inclusive to all individuals, regardless of origin, color, religion, socioeconomic status, or sexual orientation. More information about the Arkansas State University Office of Diversity and Community Engagement is available at www.astate.edu/diversity and 870-972-3081.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
And we're back on Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM with our guest, Mrs. Shunqetta Cunningham of Caris Grants and Services, giving all types of helpful tips and advice to help your local nonprofit.
All right, so we're going to jump right back into our conversation and pick up where we left off. Well, where we're going to lead into about funding for other items or other operational expenses.
Kind of the first question that's often brought to me. Okay, I want to start a nonprofit, but before I start my nonprofit, I need a grant, and I need a grant to pay my salary. I want to hire two people. I want an office. I want a van. I want. I'm also going to need money for supplies. And I'm listening. And so I have to stop because I get it. You know, starting a business or nonprofit, it's the same. You need resources and multiple resources. But first year applicants are least likely to be funded. And that's just because grant funders want to see some history of your organization. And then they also want to see what value, what fiscal or human value are you also putting into the organization to which you started. You have to have some type of commitment with your own resources, and whether you get that from friends and family or other networks, that's fine, but you have to put something into your own thing. And then two, you know, as grants have changed a lot, I do think that more grant funders, and I'm a big advocate, that there should be more funding allocated for operational and administrative support. But a lot of it does go directly to program, and you can finesse that by maybe adding in some administrative costs, you know, maybe 10-20% of your funding request. But to say you want a $100,000 grant and $70,000 of that is going to go to administrative costs. Basically, if we just put it in the most simplistic terms, then you asked for a grant funder to fund your salary. You just asked them to pay your salary. And let's just be honest, that's not attractive. So you do have to finesse your application, and then it's a build up. And so you may have to just start with a coordinator or one staff person until you're able to build that up. But to think that you're going to get a grant funded and then someone's going to pay $200,000 worth of salary expenses right off the bat, you know, it's not highly probable for that.
Okay. All right. And let's see. Miss Martha, I see you're still watching. If you could come give a little more insight into the tax question that you had, Ms. Shunqetta will be happy to answer that. She says, thank you for the information. It's very helpful for me to get started. What are some other common, I guess, questions or comments you get from people that want to start up a business or organization? I mean, they could just be at the name on the paper and no logo and no goals and mission and things like that outlined. What are some other questions, comments, concerns that you get?
Yeah, a lot. I will, you know, when you're first starting out with anything, I think it's always great to talk to someone that's in that respective area. And so if you're wanting to start a nonprofit or a business, we are in an age to where information is right at our fingertips and connecting with someone. And so I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you see an organization or have an idea, and you know, first simply Googling some other people that may be in some other states, and that you can say, hey, I would like, you know, if I can get 10 minutes of your time, I would really like some advice about certain things of how you started. And that's something that you can do like I said, easily. But as far as structurally, when you're starting a nonprofit, one of the things that people often do is they'll come to me like, well, I've already started. I filed my own paperwork with the state. I've already filed with the IRS to have a tax exempt status. And maybe that's what Miss Martha was saying. You have to start apply through the state of Arkansas to become a domestic nonprofit, and then you apply through the IRS to have your tax exempt status, and they give you two options for that, but not to just get that technical. But the missing piece of that is with a nonprofit, you do have to have a starting board of directors, because again, this is a public charity, meaning that every documentation and everything that your charity does in the name of that organization is open for public viewing, scrutiny, whatever, because you are tax exempt. You have a tax exempt status. So you do have to start with a group of board of directors to be able to accurately and truthfully say, because that is part of the requirements on your tax exempt form, that a group, and you are saying that a body of directors is agreeing to come and form an organization for the public use, and that basically you didn't make this decision alone. So I would say structurally, do research, reach out to someone in this profession, shameless plug, or simply, Google. There are templates right now that you can go out and find and say, hey, top 10 steps to starting a nonprofit. Even if you follow that roadmap, at least it's a start. And then 3, I would say, am I on the third point? Do not neglect that it's going to take some investment. So it's going to be an investment of your time, maybe of your resources.
It takes money to make money.
It does. But, oftentimes people think because you're a nonprofit that, again, everything should be free. And I really hate the model that has been set up by a lot of the large organizations and consulting agencies that work with nonprofits, because they have created created such a dependency model to where we'll write your grant for free, but they're taking $10,000 of your grant funds for their own administrative costs, when that could be directly impacting your own nonprofit. And so and that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, and then when they come for services with CARES, people say, I have it wrong because, I have upfront fees for grant services. But it's because I want you to maximize every dollar that your organization is awarded. And so I think that is crucial, so don't think that because the model has been set, that's actually the right model for your organization, that you can invest in grant consultants or in nonprofit consultants to help you. And everything, it's not for free. And just because people charge because you're a nonprofit, it does not mean that that's operating out of integrity, because at the end of the day, it's still a business. And just the same as a nonprofit, you will have to pay for utilities and in rent or leasing or however. You should also have a line item for professional services to grow your nonprofit.
You're muted.
Sorry. Sorry, there's some maintenance work going on outside my house. So, okay. So touching on that, having that extra pocket of money for other expenses, and especially the startup, what is there a magic number or any number that you can assign to the startup cost, or is it just strictly based on the organization and their program and their services offered?
With growing, helping nonprofits start, that having a funding plan or a monetizing plan for your nonprofit is crucial. And you can set a realistic budget. Again, first year you may not can have 10 people on staff. Okay. Okay, it's a growing process, right? But setting a realistic budget, and with when you have a board of directors as well, you're not making these decisions on your own. And so you all can sit together and talk about what are the main expenses that we need that will scale the branding of this nonprofit, the community outreach, because that's what you're doing your first year. You want to get people to know who you are, because once that relationship is established, the conversation and the ask for funding, and whether that's from, again, donors or grant funding, becomes easier because you've worked on that attraction, that marketing, that outreach. And so first year may be a heavy marketing and programs and community events because you're wanting to establish a presence.
Well, and that sounds like us to a T. I remember even before we launched the station, that entire 2014, we were fundraising to, one, buy the equipment so that we could put the station on the air, and as you mentioned, to introduce the community to KLEK and what we wanted to do. And then over time, as that evolved, the ask became to expand, upgrade to higher quality equipment to allow us to offer more services such as live streaming, events, and it just went from there. But by that time, the track record has been there. People know what we're about. People know that what we have to offer.
Exactly. I mean, that is so crucial. People saw the fruit and continue to see the fruit of your mission and what you do. And again, that is vital. And so that's why when people first start up a nonprofit and wanting to say, hey, we need a grant, I will be completely honest with them and say, it's the first year. What is some of the data that you have? What are some of the outputs that we can see? You know, how many programs have you had? How many people have you attracted or served through your nonprofit? If you don't have those numbers,
wiggle your mic cord at the bottom. Okay, there you go.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay, if you don't have those numbers, then what are people funding? They're funding really your hopes of what you are going to do. And if we can complicate service as well. So if you are that startup nonprofit and you're saying, hey, I need a lot of money, just start where you are. Even if you're, again, going back, I'm just trying to do something very basic. If you're mentoring young boys, right now, if you just host weekly Zoom calls with them and you're creating a PDF document of, dressing for success tips, that is still programmatic, and that can still be counted as program execution, and you're still moving along. So don't complicate your service or your starting point. As long as you're starting and then we can document that, that is great, and especially in these times. We're in some unique times, right? So even the largest of nonprofits are having to kind of scale and finesse their programs. But don't think that you have to have a lot of money to just do basic outreach and keep going within your nonprofit.
Another question, as you were talking about working within the scope of what's happening and still continuing your programs in an adjusted format, do you feel that some organizations may lose out on funding? Just say they're in year 3 or year 5 of their programs, and they maybe have lost some momentum in how they deliver. Do grant funding sources look at that as well? How has the organization progressed from year 1 to year 3 to year 5 to year 10?
This time, actually, with this year, I'm even a recipient of numerous business grants because there are organizations out there that are wanting to fund your lack to see how they can help you scale and grow and maintain in this time. So if you are at a point to where COVID is indeed impacting your bottom line, impacting your outreach, or you realize you don't have the tech capability to still kind of execute your programs what you want to, this is actually the time to apply for a lot of relief funding so that you can get your your equipment up to date, or include some software or whatever it is that you're needing if you are in a downtime. So while this may be a hard time, this is also an unprecedented time when it comes to grants. Had this been 3 years ago and I tried to apply for funding for my business, because I am not a nonprofit, I'm a for-profit that helps nonprofits, this would not have occurred. So if you are in that downtime, write down that lack. Like, what is it that you're impacting, your nonprofit cannot do? How is this pandemic impacting your bottom line? How are you not reaching your target population? What could enhance your mission and your outreach right now? If you had the funding, that's where you start. Write that down and then put a number to that, and you can actually apply and say, hey, it's not again that you it's not about communicating what your nonprofit does not have, excuse me. It's about what you cannot give to the people that need your services. So if the radio cannot go on, there's a population of people that are not getting their daily Spanish lessons. There are history lessons that are not going on. There's music and we know that music psychologically does something to you, and enhances your emotional stability. All of that is not happening if KLEK cannot continue. So you see again how we're wording that. So yes, it makes a difference in how you word. But if you are a nonprofit that's experiencing any type of downturn, this is actually the time to apply for that relief funding.
Okay. I want to say good morning to everybody that is watching and listening. Thank you, Ms. Martha, for your questions. She asks, should consultation costs be ongoing or one-time beginning?
Depending on the individual or the organization. So like for carriers, I offer strategy sessions and they start at an hour. But if it's also something that that your board possibly needs some clarity on, or some specific training on, then that's when you kind of can look at other services. But it really just again depends on what that specific need is. And so I'm more than, we can talk, of course, and Kabila has my information to share. But yeah, when you're working with a consultant, again, that's why it's important to write down what it is that you are going through. And I know we don't write a lot down, but it's important to have an assessment of your needs, of your nonprofit needs, and whether that's strategy that you're lacking, whether that's attracting, a robust board, whether that's the lack of goal setting, whatever that is, identify that need. And then that's how you'll know when you're looking for services or consulting services, what it is that you are seeking to improve upon.
If anyone else has any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in our Facebook Live feed. And Ms. Martha did clarify that you answered her tax question. I guess you were talking about it was a while back. I apologize, but she said you answered her tax question. So thank you, Ms. Martha. All right, so what are some other tips? I feel like
we got 3.5 minutes, by the way.
Okay.
Because we started late, so we're getting close up against the show end.
Okay. Okay. Attitude when writing the grant. I don't know if we've touched on this or not. Putting your all into the application. You mentioned putting your heart on paper. But do you feel that, or have you encountered someone just writing a lackluster grant proposal? Like it's just basic, in the most basic form.
Well, it depends. So when you're writing proposals, how I write as federal and state proposals different from a foundation proposal. But all of your proposals are a proposal with compassion, but with data. So that's why it's important to know your target population, to know your needs, to know your numbers, and then to also know the relevance to your community. And all of that goes into your proposal. And so remember, it's not just about communicating that you have a lack. It's about how does that lack impact the people that you are serving. And that is in essence what your proposal is, but of course having that hard data to support it. I hear the music, so
okay. We're at a minute and a half.
But I would just like to say as we're closing that with your nonprofit, the reason why I wanted to come on here and share about the midst of grant funding is because that's kind of the first thing that people think of when they're thinking of their nonprofit. Your nonprofit should be profitable. That because you're a nonprofit, that does not that should not define your financial situation. That nonprofit should actually be no profit. It is okay to make money with your nonprofit. It is okay to attract funding outside of grants, and a big part of your fiscal budget should be community and donor support. And so if you are in a financial time right now and you're not getting community donations, then I think it's time to go to the drawing board with your board of directors and ask, hey, what is our messaging? How is that all? Because why are we attracting community dollars from the community to which we serve? It is not because people are stingy. It's again, it's about messaging and the impact, and people need to see the fruit of what you do.
And we got about 20 seconds. Thank you, Shunqetta, as always, for stopping by the studio. The website is consultcaris.com. If you need her services, the information is available. She is there waiting for you. Gotta go ahead and get out of here. You guys have a great and blessed day. This is KLEK 102.5 FM.
Thank you for listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM, a program focusing on the people working to make the Jonesboro community a better place while offering viewpoints from all sides of the issues. The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of KLEK 102.5 FM, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, or our underwriters or sponsors.
Broadcasting from the First National Bank.